welcome to One Life Mechanics. Today we are talking about the masculine and feminine's commitment to life, meaning that we all have different responsibilities to life and what that looks like for us as individuals. So for men, particularly, with the state of the world as it is now, for men, their commitment to life is, perhaps as it always has been, in the most uplifted form. Men are here to protect life and to know when to take that life out of the picture. That is a personal and divine discernment that is required in this world as it presently stands. We cannot positivity wash the world and wish that it was a certain way when we're trying to build a different world from what has been. We cannot ignore the fact that there is darkness, that there are things that are considered evil. And there are times when someone has been given enough chances to where it justifies taking them out of the game of life, and that is appropriate. There are times when we need those boundaries enforced to such a degree that other people can still feel safe and be able to continue in the positivity that they are attempting to bring to the world. So being a warrior, being a king, being that divine discernment between what is appropriate and what is not permissible is a requirement in this world. Every aspect of nature has its limits, and at some point there is a cutoff point, and it's like, well, this person has been given enough chances and that is no longer permitted here. That is a divine and very sacred charge, as it were, for the masculine, to know when it is appropriate to preserve life, to protect life, and when it is time to take life out of the picture. The same thing kind of goes for the divine hunter, because certainly the aspect of the predator is a requirement in nature too. We look at Yellowstone and what happened when all the wolves were taken away from that space. The rivers were not flowing, the grasslands became too vast, and it was supporting too many deer. So when the wolves returned, that aspect alone meant that the rivers could return to their natural banks. The divine hunter is no different. We need hunters. We need population control of, say, the deer in one particular aspect of a place, in a particular land. And if there are no other large predators, then humans must fill that role as the caretakers of that land. And while death may seem like a very sad affair and perhaps a disastrous one, nature does not see it that way. It is merely a continuing or bringing different aspects to light, kind of like a symphony. We would never get sad when there's a pianissimo in the score. We would never say, oh no, that one note, that one instrument, they're being silenced, or maybe their part is, it comes to an end. We would never say, oh my goodness, this is the most tragic thing. I mean, maybe if that's how the composition is going, but normally we would not say, oh no, this is the very end, we'll never hear that note again. That's not how it is in nature. And so it is with our time on this earth, as a person perhaps, or a deer or a rabbit or what have you. We have to remember the laws of thermodynamics, yes, which is matter is never created or destroyed, only changed in form. So even though an aria may come to an end, it doesn't mean that we won't play again, perhaps in a different time by a different person, at a different concert. We wouldn't want the same thing to continue happening forever and ever. And so it is for some people's time on earth, or some animals' time on earth, is sometimes they need that divine predator or that divine executioner to show up. And that is a requirement in the continuation and betterment of the life that surrounds, like, the fuller, broader picture, which we always have to keep in mind. So, and of course, that charge that a man must have is not an easy one. Because certainly when coming back from war, which, at least at this point in time, 10 years ago, there were a vast number of young men that went off to have intensely spiritual experience in other countries. And when coming back from those experiences, there are other clearing ceremonies that need to take place. And in ancient cultures, it looked a certain way. The other aspect of being a warrior is to also be a healer. The man's divine charge to be a healer in his community is a personal one at first, to heal himself, to know how to heal his own spirit and to support his own body in ways that make sense for his own genetics or personal disposition, and to extend that healing to those around him. At the same time, it's always part of the community's responsibility to take care of him as well. And so that is why the reciprocal role of healer is one that extends to everyone in the community. Even though we may not see it this way in our modern cities, a city is still a community. A neighborhood is still a community of people that choose to live in a space with mutual peace in mind. To that end, we also need to look at the feminine role in life and how that responsibility looks different. So for women, the role of being responsible for life often looks like bringing children into this world and nurturing all life that is surrounding her, sustaining her. Just being in her presence should be something that feels nourishing. Too often, the feminine expression is not one that is celebrated in this world or has been silenced from all the ancestral traumas that we have all experienced in our lineages. So it is not always well expressed. But in ancient cultures, a woman was always the sovereign decision maker in knowing when to bring life onto this planet. And even though in the modern world, at least in the United States, we have been stripped of that charge, that responsibility, that agency and sovereignty over our own bodies and essentially over free will, which was the original charge of nature. And so when nature's laws, at least according to the Declaration of Independence, the laws that nature and nature's God must abide, the people can change that situation, particularly from the perspective of the ancient world. Regardless of any laws that currently exist, women have always had their ways of either continuing a pregnancy or not, depending on their needs for the situation and what was required. That connection still exists because of our connection with the plant world. As long as we are still connected to the land with our own innate ability to choose, have agency, and connect with the plants and our wisdom and understanding of how that chemistry works, we will always have our connection with our ability to choose, to bring life into this world or not, depending on our own free will. That free will doesn't go away just because the laws change. Free will is timeless. Sovereignty is timeless. As long as we continue to connect with the land, our own intuition, our own free will, our own personal sovereignty and inner knowing, no one can possibly take away our choice. No one can take away our free will, and no one can take away our agency of what to do with our own bodies and our own choice and inner knowing of when to bring life into this world. If the conditions are inappropriate, they're inappropriate. And once that decision has been made, nothing on heaven and earth is allowed to interfere with that decision. It is a personal one. it is situational, sometimes it is relational, and always it is an aspect of personal learning and free will. Sometimes those choices are ones that, for any human being, those are experiences. Those are points of learning, or maybe it's understanding the other side of the coin. Either way, we have no right to interfere with the decisions of life and death on an individual basis. That is something that only the divine can consider. Nature is a very great conservator of resources, and she knows exactly when to fruit, to flower, to give its resources to other plants. Nature has its own rhythm, and women are innately in tune with that rhythm because of the movements of the moon, or their own innate knowing, understanding of where everything's at and what feels appropriate. As a side note on the subject of PMS, which should probably be an entire video unto itself, there is no such thing as PMS. Women are innately in tune with the rhythms of nature, and if there is something in her environment that is off and it does not get resolved all month, there will come a point in that cycle, that lunar cycle that she is attuned with, that she will no longer be able to tolerate the nonsense of what is not getting fixed, which is the masculine's, often the masculine aspect's responsibility to change, sometimes drastically, with great levels of force. And if it does not get changed, then she has every right to, as an extension of nature, to get very emotional and become very upset, because it is not okay. If it is not supporting life, it is not okay. It is not negotiable. It is not something that can be swept under the rug, medicated, given painkiller prescriptions for, or in any other ways swept under the rug. Inappropriate. There is no such thing. By extension, when a woman says it is not appropriate for life to come into this world at this time, that is her personal sovereignty speaking. That is the universe saying, there was a window, there was an opportunity, but because nothing was resolved drastically and very swiftly, because strong action was not taken, this is the result. Because of that decision, there can be no additional life in this space. That is free will. That is the woman's ability to communicate with the universe, to follow her intuition, and to essentially do what is best. I'm not saying that every pregnancy that is not continued was not done for the best reasons, but that is a personal discussion between that person and the divine. We cannot interject. So if anything, our connection with the land is paramount, both for bringing life into this world, failing safe enough to do so, because certainly we get into the most trouble as human beings when we get too distant from the land, but also from a connection with the spiritual aspects of the land from a warrior's perspective. I have listened to so many stories of warriors coming back to civilian life, and the first thing that they intuitively know to do is to reconnect with the land, to embrace it, to sleep on it, to feel supported by it, to feel the peace and the cadence of it, to feel soothed by the wind, the sky, the stars, the grass, the waters, to take it all in, to reconnect with their own inner source, and also the aspect of the feminine that is healing. Connecting with the feminine aspect of nature and how she sustains us, heals our spirit, our psyche, give us a place to rest. That is truth for both men and women. Always know that you can rest in the arms of nature. In these moments of life and death, because birth is another one of those moments when every time a woman gets pregnant, she must pass under the arch of life and death. There is a distinct possibility that she might not make it. In the same way that when a warrior goes to combat, he might not come back. That is the same thing that a woman must choose when she chooses to bring life into this world. It is not a trivial decision in any aspect. And yet most women do want to bring life into this world. Many times there isn't enough life force in that space to sustain life. Sometimes the aspect of miscarriages has to do with ancestral wounds. It has to do with that child sometimes just getting cold feet about life. Life is a very intense and sometimes serious affair. And once again, what sounds great on the other side of life may not seem like such a great idea the closer and closer we get to it. It's like bungee jumping. Like, oh, that sounds really fun. Let's do that. It's going to be totally safe. There's a bungee cord there. You're always connected to divine by intuition. It's great. But then you get to the edge of that platform and look down onto whatever happens to be down there. Maybe it's just rocks, or maybe it's water. Whatever it is, the splashdown looks a lot more horrific from where you're standing at the edge than it does from safely in your car or at home or the day before, when it's not really a possibility. Sometimes it's health concerns that mean that a child doesn't physically end up in the world, because sometimes what needs to happen is that the woman needs to take care of her physical temple more deeply and prioritize that, because that is what has not been happening in that particular lineage, etc. Sometimes it's our connection with the land, because sometimes the spirit of the land that is meant to sustain us, to give us wonderful food, to give us everything that we need, is polluted, and the air is not suitable for sustaining that particular life form, because sometimes the very spirit of that child is so high level that they are not able to sustain themselves on this physical realm without extreme pristine conditions. The lesson is that we need to take better care of our personal temples. A warrior cannot come back from war and then just completely disregard his physical health. That is not going to work out well, because there's going to be a lot of physical stress in the body. There's going to be a lot of psychological dysregulation, and the body is going to need a lot of help. Same thing with bringing life into this world. It almost requires training, physical toning, addressing sleep cycles, addressing the environment that this woman is in, and addressing what is she eating? Is she getting all the nutrition that she needs? It's not necessarily something that's easy for the body to do. It's easy to start, but to continue, that requires a whole nother level of personal fortitude. It's like saying that it's easy to leave the planet. There's lots of ways to do that, and some of them are very easy. But the harder thing to do is to continue living. That's the tricky part. That's the thing that makes all of us absolutely astounding, because we are choosing life. And in that sense, when we look at men and women and their charges, their responsibilities to life and what that looks like, we really have to take into consideration the human sovereignty of responsibility to themselves, and responsibility to the life that surrounds them. What is appropriate for that situation? Everything is about context, situations, and individual experiences, individual choices. And so without respecting those choices, that free will, that personal communication and sovereignty with the rest of the universe, we do everyone a disservice by creating judgments that are, quite frankly, none of our business. I just want to leave you with the idea of your own personal sovereignty, what that means, your ability to choose, and what it takes to sustain life, what it means to protect life, what is required, literally the physical level of force required in order to protect? Do you truly understand how much that costs? What that physically feels like in your body? And then to imagine yourself as a woman, like physically close your eyes, and to imagine bringing life into this world. How does that feel in your body? Because without the ability to close our eyes and imagine ourselves as these people, we have no compassion. We have no understanding. We have no, even the faintest idea of what it means to deal with life and to accept death as it is, knowing that each of us has that divine charge, that divine responsibility to continue life, to preserve life, or to bring it into this world. And those aspects, play with the roles. Certainly women can be physical protectors, and men actually are the ones that choose when life is to start on the planet. So consider that. There might be a choice after the fact, but sometimes it's that initial spark that is the most important. So every person has these decisions to consider. Their own personal health, what is good for their own temple, what feels right, what is the most loving, knowing that once a life is started, they have a certain set point based on how it is that they came onto this planet. The circumstances of their birth, the gestation, the nutrition, comments, the different people that the mother was around, all of that comes into play during the child's life. So how is it we want to construct life? I wanted to leave you with these concepts of self-care, of personal responsibility, and the divine charge regarding life as both men and women, and what that looks like for all of us. Choosing to imagine ourselves as these other people in their own experiences, and giving yourself grace for the choices that you have made, and giving yourself enough room to take care of yourself after having had to choose. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on One Life Mechanics.